Coming up, what an excellent day for the Rosary. Well, howdy folks, and welcome to Minute 102 of the Exorcist Minute, a show where we endeavor to examine, extrapolate, and excavate The Exorcist, minute by terrifying minute. My name is Lester Ryan Clark.
And I'm Keenan Diaz.
And we'll be your holy guides on this journey through what some have called the scariest movie of all time. Okay, so our minute begins with Father Merrin praying the Rosary.
And it ends with Father Karras running down the steps outside Georgetown University as Merrin's voice says, especially important is the warning to avoid conversations with the demon.
Yeah, Karras, you know, the thing you've been doing for half the movie. But no, I think we're being a little hard on Dimmy right now. He's out there running around, getting the supplies for Merrin. Let's give him a break, and let's go back to the top of this minute, which opens with a really nice shot. It's another one of those every frame a painting shots. We got a close-up of Merrin's hand as he clutches a rosary. We can hear that he is saying the Hail Mary. For non-Catholics, this is a prayer to the Virgin Mary. It goes like this. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Mm-hmm. And that is actually, I think, the first prayer that I ever learned, and one that is burned into my brain. I can recite that at the drop of a hat. That and the Lord's Prayer, which we'll also see in this movie.
So I have the Lord's Prayer burned into my muscle memory, but they keep changing it. It feels like they changed it like once since I was a kid, and it's like, how do they keep doing this? And then, yeah, you know, I learned a Hail Mary because I did get to confessional, my first confessional, but I only did it once. So, yeah. And you go. I forget how old you are when you do confession, your first confession, but
actually,
it's one of the sacraments. Yeah. So I had done my baptism and then my first communion and then my first confession. And then that's as far as I got. So, and then, you know, at your first confession, you're like, whatever, 7 or 8. And you're like, what sins do you have? And you don't have any. And you're like, oh, I guess I got mad once or whatever. And then the father is like, okay, you got to do 10 Hail Marys. And so he gives you homework to do.
Yep.
And so then I never went back.
So you never turned in your 10 Hail Marys, I see.
Never turned them in, and so I was just, it's such a shame spiral of never doing my 10 Hail Marys. I just never went back, yeah.
And see, because guilt is built into our religion, folks, that interest compounds.
That's right.
Because then it's 10 Hail Marys, and then it's 20 Hail Marys the next week, and then Keenan, you got some Hail Marrying to do. I mean,
I again, I didn't have any sins back then, but I got them now, and so it's compound interest up the wazoo for sure. Do you know the Flanders boys? When the Simpson kids go to live with the Flanderses, and they're watching lame religious TV,
right,
and they're watching this show about sheep, and it's the two brother sheep, and they're talking to the older sheep. He says, "It's not fair. My brother Jeremiah has a sin to confess, and I have none." Don't you see, Josiah? You do have a sin to confess. The sin of envy. Blah, blah, blah. And you come back to the Flanderses, and Todd says, well, that's all well and good for sheep, but what are we to do?
Oh, if we could all just be sheep, it would be so much simpler.
So much simpler. We'd have sins to confess.
Yeah. Oh, boy. But yeah, actually, folks, I'm not 100% sure whether Merrin is praying the Rosary right now or he's just holding the Rosary while he's doing some normal prayers. He's saying the Hail Mary, which is one of the prayers that you do say on the Rosary. And for those who don't know, basically what you do is you kind of like, the Rosary has all those little beads as kind of like a way of keeping track of how many prayers you're supposed to say. So there's a bunch of little beads, and for those you say the Hail Marys, and there's like larger, more decorative beads, and for those you say a Lord's Prayer, and you just kind of like go through the chain, and then there's a couple of other more singular prayers in there, but I've forgotten what they are.
Right. So to pray the Rosary is a specific thing that you do with a rosary and rosary beads. Yeah. So we're not sure what he's doing here, but Yeah, and then a rosary is, could be very personal, like the actual physical item of the rosary can be a very
Oh,
personal
yes.
artifact, right?
It
So,
can be handed down. It can be like your mother's, right? Like I have my
right.
grandmother's, for example.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
When my grandmother passed away, she was in the hospital, and we
Mhm.
had during COVID, which was a very difficult time, and there
Mhm.
was a fear that we wouldn't be able to get her rosary. It was one of the things that she wanted, because they weren't
Oh,
letting people, into the isolation wards, right? And there was all
right,
this
right.
question about that, so you couldn't get a priest in there. You had to get a priest
Mhm.
over Zoom, but then yeah, eventually they would let her have the rosary at least, because it was like,
Yeah.
as she was in her 80s, and as she knew she was dying, right? She was like,
Mhm.
well, I need my rosary. It's such an
Yeah.
important part of my faith, and I don't want to pass on without it.
Yeah. And yeah, so you might find people praying the rosary during times of trial,
Hmm.
like right now, right? Merrin is praying for strength, or if Chris was Catholic, she might be praying the rosary for Reagan,
Hmm.
or you might do it for a sick person, or if somebody's in trouble and you're praying for them.
Right. And Chris is not Catholic, so she don't know what to do. She's gonna
Mhm.
she's gonna come in here and doing all sorts of nonsense to
She's
keep her
interrupting
hands
his,
busy.
but it's classic Merrin, right? He doesn't say anything about that.
Classic Merrin.
Classic Merrin. That's so Merrin. We already did that. But yeah, before Chris comes in, where we're still looking at this rosary, we're looking at the cross hanging from it, and we see that Merrin's hand is shaking a little bit. I couldn't tell if that was to show that he was scared, or to show that he is old, or if it was just like a part of the rhythm of the prayer, or maybe it's like all of those things. Keenan, what do you think?
Oh, that's interesting. I don't see him as being scared. So I took
Mm,
that. I don't see him being scared, basically the whole movie.
mm,
So
mm.
maybe that's me sort of, jumping towards the end and knowing how this ends. But yeah, I take it more as the illness part of it, the physical
Mm.
weakness of him and his circulatory problems.
No, you're right. I don't know why I thought that. Right? He's not scared. He's
Hmm.
he's. I mean, if anything, maybe he's scared for Reagan, possibly,
Hmm.
or for the like he's hoping for the success of the exorcism.
Right.
But no, it does seem more like he's, or just maybe that his body is going to fail him
Right.
at this most important time. But yeah, we could also simply read the shaking as part of his illness. Yeah.
Right. I sent you a screenshot because I don't think you've seen The Seventh Seal, the Ingmar Bergman movie that is like Max von Sydow's
Oh,
other
I
most
did.
famous
I
film. Oh, you
did.
have seen it.
Yeah,
Oh,
I think we talked about it on the show.
oh, good. I bet you love it.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
so good. Yeah. So it
I
does.
did love it. I saw it.
But this shot does sort of recall.
Grim Reaper playing chess.
Yeah, but there's other shots of him, like so again he's probably the most famous person in international cinema who's in the movie, right?
Yeah.
Ellen Burstyn is known as a supporting actor at this point,
Mhm.
but she's going to become a star
Right.
after this movie. But yeah, Max von Sydow in these Ingmar Bergman movies, he plays this knight who is
Mhm.
struggling with his faith, and he sees death, and he wants to get to know death more so that death can convince him that God is real, right? He wants to go
Mhm, mhm.
see God. So yeah, so there's a lot of shots of him praying. So that's like one of the more iconic shots in Max von Sydow's career is him by himself and then praying, and it's similar,
Yeah.
not exactly like Friedkin is aping that or parodying that,
Right.
but it is similar to compare them, where he's bowing his head, but and his prayer in The Seventh Seal is kind of a prayer of like frustration and desperation,
Right.
as opposed to this one, which isn't. And then, of course, because Bergman and most people in Sweden, I don't know if most people, but the dominant religion in Sweden is Lutheran Christianity. So
Mhm.
they don't have a reliance as much on like rosaries or relics like that. So he's just holding his own hand, and then in the Bergman film, he's sometimes like finding older relics like statues and stuff, and like trying to
Right.
hold on to them because he's so isolated and alone.
Right. Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so even if it doesn't exactly mirror this image, you think Max von Sydow fans will be reminded? They'll be like, "Oh yeah, Seventh Seal,"
Right.
which I
Exactly.
definitely saw. Just like I read Paradise Lost. No.
Just like I'm reading Paradise Lost now. I swear to you, because we're doing bonus episodes in Paradise Lost for people who
Yes.
aren't listening to this bonus episode.
Yeah.
I swear
They may
to
or
you,
may not still
Lester.
be in the feed. But yeah.
Right. I swear to you, Lester, my eyes are going down the page in Paradise Lost. So I don't know if that counts as reading. But my eyes are seeing the words. I don't know if I understand what's
Yeah.
going on. But
It's famously tough, folks. I have like 17 tabs open as I'm trying to decipher this, and we got this. This isn't even the bonus episode, but let me just tell you, we're reading the part with Adam and Eve now, and oh boy. If two naked people could be less interesting.
And again, I'm totally reading it. I don't see any nudity in these pages as my eyes go down the page. But
Anyway.
Right, but as I'm looking at this shot and knowing about Max von Sydow and knowing that's how movie stars sort of work, right? Or like major actors, you sort of compare and contrast them. And people who do criticism in the realm of star studies, it's called, talk about that as their persona, right? Like if you've seen The Seventh Seal, it's impossible for you to entirely put that away as you watch Max von Sydow in a similar shot. So even if Friedkin isn't trying to do that, and probably Max von Sydow isn't like, oh, I'm going to bring out the stuff from my my bag of tricks and bring out the big guns, right? Like this is my Freebird, right? Is this sort of shot? Even if that's not what's going on in terms of what the filmmakers are doing, audiences, if you have that prior knowledge, you can't help but know that, right?
Right.
And for me, it was the opposite, right? Knowing The Exorcist growing up and then discovering the Bergman films, I do it backwards, right? And say like, oh, look, this is Father Merrin in The Seventh Seal.
Right. Yeah. What's Father Merrin doing in The Seventh Seal? He's got a little girl to save.
Get out of my Seventh Seal, Father Merrin.
Aw, you got your Father Merrin in my Seventh Seal. You got your Seventh Seal in my Father Merrin.
Right, exactly.
And Reese's made $1 billion.
Yeah, but there is a famous shot in The Seventh Seal where he learns that a witch is going to get burned, and she is like a young girl. She might be around Reagan's age, and he goes and looks, and he's not trying to stop it. He's not allowed to stop it. But he does want to be there to see what it looks like when someone dies, and he's trying to see if if he could see God in her eyes, and then afterwards, like, well, do you see it? And he's like, no, there's nothing there. Yeah. So it is like the opposite of what happens in The Exorcist, I suppose, in some ways.
Yeah.
Check it out, folks. The Seventh Seal, a real laugh riot.
The dance numbers alone is just...
Oh, boy. That's funny. Do you mean that? It ends with a dance number.
Well, yes. I forgot about that until now. It's the iconic poster.
That's very funny.
It's like a conga line or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And you can definitely tell which one's the Grim Reaper because it's the big scythe. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so in any case, we cut from here, and now we see the room that we are in. This is the living room. So Merrin's sitting in a white love seat by the fireplace, and Chris has just come in with a cup of tea and a little saucer. Merrin hasn't noticed her yet. He's still deep in prayer. Quietly, unobtrusively, she goes over and she puts the cup and the saucer down in front of him just as he is finishing up the Hail Mary. Merrin's had one hand in front of his face, perhaps to block out distraction, and now he takes it away. He discovers the coffee. Chris says, "Excuse me," as she now goes over to build up the fire, and Merrin says, "Thank you." And there's actually a little bit more of this exchange in the book. I want to read it for you here. Let's have a listen. A reading from the Book of Blatty. Merrin glanced back to Chris. "I should have asked you. You don't mind if we begin right away?" She'd been watching him, glowing with relief at the sense of decision and direction and command sweeping into the house like sun-drenched day. "No, I'm glad," she said gratefully. "But you must be so tired, Father Merrin." The old priest saw her anxious gaze flicking upward toward the raging of the demon. "Would you like a cup of coffee?" She was asking in a voice that was insistent and faintly pleading. "It's hot and fresh made. Would you like some?" Merrin saw the hands lightly clasping and unclasping, the deep caverns of her eyes. "Yes, I would," he said warmly. "Thank you." Something heavy had been gently brushed aside, told to wait. "If you're sure it's no trouble." Chris led him to the kitchen, and soon he was leaning against the stove with a mug of black coffee in his hands. Chris picked up a liquor bottle. "Want some brandy in that, Father?" she asked him. Merrin bent his head and looked down into the coffee mug without expression. "Well, the doctors say I shouldn't," he said. "But thank God, my will is weak." Chris blinked and stared blankly, unsure of his meaning, until she saw the smile in his eyes as he lifted his head and held out his mug. "Yes, thank you, I will." With a smile, Chris poured the liquor. "What a lovely name you have," Merrin told her as she did so. "Chris MacNeil. It's not a stage name." Trickling brandy into her coffee, Chris shook her head. "No, I'm really not Sadie Glutz." "Thank God for that," murmured Merrin with lowered eyes. With a gentle, warm smile, Chris sat down. "And what's Lancaster, Father? So unusual. Were you named after someone?" "I think perhaps a cargo ship," Merrin murmured as he stared off absently. Lifting the coffee mug to his lips, he sipped, then reflected. "Or a bridge. Yes, I suppose it was a bridge." Turning his gaze to Chris, he looked ruefully amused. But now, Damien," he said. "How I wish I had a name like that. So lovely." "Where does it come from, Father, that name?" It was the name of a priest who devoted his life to taking care of the lepers on the island of Molokai. He finally caught the disease himself. Merrin looking aside. Lovely name, he said again. I believe with a first name like Damien, I might even be content with a last name like Glutz. Chris chuckled. She unwound, felt easier, and for minutes, she and Merrin spoke of homely things, little things. Finally, Sharon appeared in the kitchen, and only then did Merrin move to leave. It was as if he had been waiting for her arrival, for immediately he carried his mug to the sink, rinsed it out, and placed it carefully in the dish rack. That was good. That was just what I wanted, he said. Chris got up and said, I'll take you to your room. Merrin thanked her and followed her to the door of the study, where she told him, If there's anything you need, Father, just let me know. He put his hand on her shoulder, and as he squeezed it lightly and reassuringly, Chris felt a warmth and a power flowing into her, as well as a feeling of peace and an odd sense of something that felt like, what, she wondered. Safety? Yes, something like that. You're very kind, she said. His eyes smiled. He said, Thank you. He removed his hand, and as he watched her walk away, a sudden tightening of pain seemed to clutch at his face. He entered the study and closed the door. From a pocket of his trousers, he slipped out a tin marked Bayer aspirin, extracted a nitroglycerin pill, and placed it carefully under his tongue. Okay, so what do we make of this extra little bit of exchange?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up. So I'm from Hawaii, as you said a little bit on the show. And so when I hear Father Damien, as we have in our movie, I think instantly of Father Damien, the one that is referenced here.
Right.
So when I did read the book,
Yes.
No, that was surprising for me to see that okay, yeah. So of course, Blatty knows the term Father Damien is this really super famous person, because I was wondering about that. So we see how that's an intentional choice that Damien Karras is named after Father Damien, who is a saint now. I don't think he would have been a saint at the time of right, because they would call him Saint Damien, I suppose.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that he is aware of that. So in Hawaii, they talk a lot about Father Damien. He's one of the most famous people, and I was growing up in Hawaii in the 80s, and there was we as a child, we weren't necessarily taught about like, we got colonized essentially, and we and so the Catholic Church came in and was part of that colonization process and all that, and like questioning whether we should be holding up like saints as part of like Hawaiian history as opposed to Native people, right? And so that conversation happens a little bit, but yeah, when I was a kid, at least, Father Damien was someone who was just like synonymous with the founding, as it were, quote unquote, of Hawaii and like civilizing it. And so he went to the leper colony in Molokai. So they had they all throughout the islands, they would put people who had leprosy onto Molokai, and then they would they found a peninsula near the edge of the island to found the leper colony there. Right. So this was the entire kingdom's leper colony, and then Father Damien went there. I mean, as much, so I don't know. So now I'm not sure about how much of it is me like as a kid who only got my Hawaiian history education up to like the age of 8. But I mean, what Father Damien did, I think, is pretty extraordinary. So he was going and ministering to the lowest of the lows and really living a life of Jesus and working with people who were shunned and like put away, and then got the disease himself and then lived the rest of his life there. And so the leper colony, and now we would call it Hansen's disease. Like that's still something that in Hawaii is very famous and they're dealing with. So my grandmother, who I just talked about, was a nurse in that leper colony. Well, by then again, it was the Hansen's disease, where they destigmatized it even more. But so so I again, like as we watched The Exorcist when I was a kid, I was like, well, Father Damien, that must be something, and then not see that at all anywhere in the movie, right? That's not mentioned. But then to talk about his name in the book, I was like, oh, it's there. So I'm not crazy that now like we're making this connection between Karras and the real Father Damien.
Right. Yeah. And folks, not to be inelegant, but well, I'm not even going to finish that. I'm just going to say, interesting that we got Father Damien.
Father Damien is
who contracts the disease himself.
Father Damien, right?
Yes. There we go.
No, I think that's really, really wonderful. Yeah.
I like it. Yeah.
Why did you want to talk about this exchange? Like, what do you think about it? That's
first thing for me is how he doesn't want coffee or need coffee, but he sees that Chris needs him to need coffee, so he accepts it. I really like that little touch. Again, folks, it's like his ego has been turned inside out. Like where other people would be thinking of themselves, he sees every little detail about someone else's situation. I'm even remembering right now something as little as our last minute when he asks Damien, "Are you very tired?" in the movie. In the book, he says, "You look very tired. Are you very tired?" Just that extra little bit to reassure Karras that he sees him, sees his tiredness. You look very tired. Are you very tired? Right? Just little things like that. So not only can Merrin see through you or discern you like really easily, just like Howdy, but he is continually using it for good. Like oh, Father Karras, rather than well, so it's you. Yeah. And so he also seems to have this fascination with names.
Right.
We're going to see more of that later on too. Maybe the later bit is just part of the ritual, but he's going on about how beautiful everyone's names are, and we know it's genuine because, again, Shakespeare rules. He's talking about Damien's name when Damien isn't there. And also, I just love how he still has only just met Damien, but he can still find something to admire about him in his name.
Right. I think it's interesting in the book asking about Chris's stage name, whether that's a stage name or not, right? And so obviously, like, Blatty has created a Chris MacNeil, like he's thought about it as a character, like what would be this great name, right? And you're a writer, and like sometimes you can spend way too much time thinking about like what's the perfect name, how does it feel in your tongue, right, as it comes out, right? And then sometimes it's just procrastination because you don't want to write, right? But but like thinking about that, and if that was very common in Hollywood, obviously, especially in the old days of having stage names. There's still trying to think of who might have. There's still people. Nick Cage is a stage name. Right. Tom Cruise is a stage name. Right. He's Tom Mapother. Yeah. So there's still some of that going on. But back in the old days, it was almost by default they would change your name. So like John Wayne. Do you know? Maybe we should. Do you know these? Are you good with these? Stage
no.
names?
I'm terrible at these.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah. John Wayne was Marion Morrison. Which
okay.
is a terrible name if you're trying to be macho
for a cowboy,
a cowboy guy, right? So John Wayne, very simple, right? Judy Garland is Frances Ethel Gumm, Gumm. That won't do. Get rid of that. Judy now. Joan Crawford is Lucille Lucero, which I like.
Yeah, Lucille Lucero.
Yeah, I like Lucille Lucero. So I don't know.
That sounds like it's like yeah.
And that one's crazy because they had a contest in a magazine, and they're like, hey, what name should we give our new movie star? And people wrote in to rename Lucille Lucero. Wow. Yeah, that you got stuck with. So yeah, can you imagine that? Like you have no consultation, just your company is like, your name is Lucille, or your name is Joan Crawford from now on.
Oh no. 2024's audience is going to rake you over the coals.
Joan Crawford, and then
Poopy Butt Duty Head.
Exactly, Poopy Butt Duty Head, or Bodie McBoatface. Like when he's talking about, I was probably named after a boat or a bridge. It was like, Bodie McBoatface the contest, right? Or there was like the Chuck Norris Bridge they were going to name, and people were like, no, we can't name this a Chuck Norris Bridge. This contest is over. Or the Stephen Colbert Bridge, right? But yeah, Bodie McBoatface.
If you name it the Chuck Norris Bridge, nobody's going to want to cross it.
Exactly. Don't you dare cross the Chuck Norris Bridge.
The Chuck Norris Bridge burns you. Watch out, everybody. London is falling down. But not the bridge, because it's the Chuck Norris Bridge.
Yeah, what did they end up naming it? The McGarry Bridge. Boring.
Okay. All right. Sure.
Boo.
Whatever floats your boat.
Yeah, they wanted the name of the Chuck Norris Bridge, and that was winning in the contest. And then Stephen Colbert on the Colbert Report took over, and he was like, name it the Stephen Colbert Bridge. And then the Hungarians who were holding this, like, this is over. This contest is done. We're not going to have Americans naming our bridge after their... So yes, the Megyer Bridge.
Okay, well, there we go.
All right, let me give you just one more stage name, which was Archie Leach.
Archie Leach.
Yeah,
okay.
And he became Cary Grant.
Oh,
because Archibald Leach wasn't going to work out for them.
Yeah, it's weird. Like with these names, you can kind of see, like, once you hear them, it's like, yeah, she looks like a gum.
Judy Garland looks like a gum.
I mean, I'm just, not in a negative way. Of course, not in a one of those 0-calorie gums.
With xylitol.
Exactly.
Yeah, Judy Garland, now with xylitol.
She's filled with xylitol.
Oh, yeah.
And all other manner of things.
Inject her with xylitol in the morning to keep her up, and they pop her with xylitol pills in the evening to keep her down.
Yep. Oh, jeez. We went too far.
We didn't do it.
That was MGM's
fault.
That was a Chuck Norris too far. No, you're right. It's absolutely MGM.
Right, we didn't do it. But yeah, so if it had not occurred to me, even though again I read the book,
Yeah.
it had not occurred to me that we're thinking about this. Like Chris MacNeil is like Shirley MacLaine.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there we go. This is supposed to be Shirley MacLaine.
Yeah.
And so her real name is Shirley MacLaine Beatty. So she takes her mother's name for her stage name.
Right.
But it's, of course, it's MacLaine as we spell it is MacLaine.
Right.
And so her real name looks more like MacLean. Leam.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And then her brother, Warren Beatty, takes Beatty, but their original Beatty is Beaty, and then adds a T in there. So they both take their real family names, but have to change the spelling so people don't go like, "What? Miss MacLean or Mr. Beatty?"
Right.
So it's their real. I don't know if that counts as a stage name. So it's their real names.
Yeah. Oh no. Absolutely. Yeah.
But they tweak it around.
Tweak it a little bit, right?
Right.
And sometimes it's because their great grandfathers burned witches, and they don't want to be associated with that. So they had a little W in their name.
Well,
no, I'm not Hawthorne. I'm Nathaniel Hawthorne. Yes.
I'm not a Nathaniel Haythorne.
No.
I bet it was more because how do you pronounce Hawthorne without it?
Oh yeah, right. Because is it Hathorne? Is it Haythorne?
Yeah.
a lot of different ways to spell Lester.
Oh yeah.
No. There's the British way.
Oh,
right?
of course.
It's like Leicester, right?
It's just so wrong.
Like Leicester, right?
Get with the program, England. Learn to speak English, England.
When I become a famous writer, that'll be my I've been thinking Alistair.
You're gonna go by Alistair?
Alistair
Clark with an E at the end?
Yes, with an E, with an extra E. Just adding A's and E's.
Oh yeah, that's class.
The third. Yeah. But anyway, yeah. And actually, okay. So back to Merrin's fascination with names, right?
Yeah.
This is the first time I'm realizing this too. Maybe another mirror with Captain Howdy. So Merrin is acknowledging and praising everyone's name.
Right.
Everyone in this house, this little circle of love that Chris has created and that Merrin is now tending and protecting. Everyone has a name. All of them have names. Regan has a name and, in fact, is given even more of her name because of Merrin. That's a little bit later. He's thinking about Damien's name. He's talking about Chris's name. Howdy has no name.
Right.
He is an intruder in this circle. And more than that, we can read it as, they have names and he doesn't because he's evil. But even more than that, I don't know if Merrin or even Blatty is doing this consciously, but by Merrin focusing so much on the family's names and their identities, he is also breaking the spell that Howdy has cast with these fake identities, both the fake identities that he's trying to give each of the family members, right? Like, well, so it's you. He's trying to get Karis to believe that he is the worst version of himself, right?
Okay.
Like, that's your identity, right? But then also the fake identities that he has created for himself, for Howdy, right? Merrin is gently reminding us and revealing to us that Howdy doesn't really have an identity, and this charming devil that we've come to know and love throughout the book is another facade. I said in the last minute that Merrin became my favorite character as soon as he arrived. Something else happened as soon as he walked through that door. Up to this point, we've sort of been reveling in all the little differences the book presents to us in regards to Howdy's personality, right? He's snarky, he's a master chess player, he's Hannibal Lecter, he's articulate, he's eloquent, and very good at being bad, and we relish that in a villain, right? We love a Moriarty or a Joker. But as soon as Merrin walked through the door, something happened to me. I was like, okay, we're done. Howdy's got to go. It's like Merrin lifted the veil, and you see that like what Howdy really is. Like, he's not a dashing devil. He's a murderer, rapist. He is a bug. He is a pestilence. He is that thing that needs to be gone, right? You know how like they say a leech's saliva has like a numbing agent that makes it so that you don't feel it, right? You don't know it's there until you like lift your leg out of the water and you see it's just like covered in black little worms, right?
That's why I don't go in the water.
Yeah. And they all got their like little teeth in you and they've been sucking on your blood, right? That's what Howdy is. But we didn't know it because of that numbing agent, right? And then Merrin came in, he showed us that. He's like, lift up your leg out of the water. And we did. And we see it's like there are so many, it's like hair on your legs, right? Except we've been there, our leg has been under that water for so long that all these leeches are like fat and bloated, right? Keenan, have you ever seen those pictures of tick infestations on humans?
Yeah, that's why I don't go outside.
Yeah. Just like even just like a single tick that's like bloated with blood.
And you like see it starts to look like blood, right? It looks blood red, yeah.
And it's like it's blown up like a balloon. It's like Willy Wonka's like blueberry thing, right? And it's like that shouldn't exist in nature, right? But like howdy is like a colony of ticks under your shirt, right? And you look down and you see them for the first time. You like really see them and you're like, oh God, how was I ever like charmed by you? This is disgusting. This is a nightmare. And that's what Merrin has done for us. He has made us see howdy for what it is. And he has come with a solution. He is that expert doctor who's going to remove these disgusting things, these ticks, these leeches from your arm or your stomach or whatever. And you're like, oh, thank God.
So he's going to convince you to take off your devil Halloween costume, throw it in the fire.
You know what? if that's where the ticks were coming from. So, yeah, Chris has set down the coffee. Merrin has noticed it. He has said thank you, and we cut, and we are now over Merrin's shoulder. Chris has knelt down in front of the fireplace to either start or build up the fire. Keenan, was there a fire going? Like just like really low, or was there no fire?
I think
I don't see anything.
No, I think there's no fire.
Okay.
And it's interesting, in the next couple of scenelets, we're going to be pretty near fireplaces a couple times. And yeah, so I'm glad you're talking about this with the ticks. I was thinking about this. This might be similar where this house is cold, right?
Yes.
This house is freezing, and it feels like the McNeil household has sort of gotten used to that, right? We've seen how in the past, like we've seen Sharon keeping a coat by the door to Reagan's room, and like we're just dealing with this. But now there's a company coming over, and they're like, well, geez, this is kind of like embarrassing, you know? Do you ever get that? Like you have company over after a while, like, oh, this is a little bit dirtier than my house is a little bit messier than I remember it or whatever. And you find yourself
every single time someone comes over?
Right, exactly. And you're like,
you know how I solved that problem?
Wow.
I say, don't come over.
You know, I have stacks of books everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And like I just live with that. And then when someone comes over, I'm like, oh, actually, that's kind of embarrassing that I just have like I hoard books, right?
Right.
So as I'm like, oh, so even though I'm trying to enjoy their company and like be there, like I find myself cleaning up in front of them, and even if they don't care about it, right? So I wonder if that's like the same with the McNeil household. They're like, oh God, someone's in here, and like, Jesus, it's freezing in here.
Yeah.
And so let's start this fire, and let's like we see that happening again. Like, okay, we're not just going to be living like this forever. Like maybe it's like this is the beginning of the end. Let's get back to normal. Right. Some of it I think is just like, geez, even though Merrin is not a judgy person, right? Like the idea of like having a witness to your life and seeing for the first time these things that you have taken for granted, like the colony of ticks in the back of your neck that you just live with.
Well, they're just my little buddies. And it's like, you know,
right. Don't name the ticks. Don't name the ticks.
I'm all about names, but don't name the ticks. Oh, it's too late.
It's too late. You have named them.
He's already got a little league game. It's just...
Yeah. As long as you haven't made them sign a lease, you've made them sign a lease.
Is it just at least tell me it's a month to month? No.
12 months with an option to renew. This is terrible.
Are they subleasing at least? No.
No. They're the primary tenant.
Anyway, yeah. So Chris is making the fire now, and Merrin says thank you very much as he's I think he's putting the rosary away. Chris turns. She has just knelt down, and she looks at him as she says very quietly, "You're welcome." And her face and her voice broke my heart, Keenan. I said in the last minute how childlike everyone seems in Merrin's presence. Chris looks so young here. There's like this shyness. Listen to how quietly she says, "You're welcome." But like there's also like a curiosity. Like look at how like she lights the match, and as soon as she hears him sipping the coffee, she sort of like steals a glance at him. She wants to look at him, and her eyes are so big, like a child. She's taking it all in. But the rest of her face tells a different story. You can see the redness under her eyes and the bruises healing, and that mixed with this childlike expression, you just want to grab Merrin and be like, please help her. You're the only one who can do it, please.
Right. Oof.
But yeah, so she turns back to the fire, but she can't resist. She's got to talk to him too. She turns back and she says, would you like some brandy in that, Father?
Mm-hmm.
Again, like wanting to do something, wanting to help, and again, this shy, almost inaudible whisper, and the word Father, again, like almost feeling like she is talking to her actual father.
Right. And almost inaudible, like as if she's getting used to it with Father Karras, I suppose, but
right.
at the beginning of the movie, she's not even really sure how to address Catholic priests, right? Like
Right.
she has Father Dyer over and is like, oh, this is weird. He's like tells jokes and how weird it is, right? And now with him,
and she remarks that in the book. She's like, you're not like, it's
right.
like you're not like what I would expect a priest to be.
Right. He's like, what do you expect a priest to be? and then yeah,
that's not like a placeholder, like Father Dyer actually did that.
That's what he actually does, right?
That's when they didn't invite him back again.
But with Merrin feels like what she would expect a priest to act like, right?
Yes.
And so she is even more like odd and not sure what to do. And as myself as an atheist, even though I knew priests when I was a kid and like again went to the rectory and my mother did business with them or helped them with accounting work and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like still today when I meet a priest, I'm like, oh, I hope I'm not, just by being myself, I hope I'm not an affront to them. I hope I'm not being offensive to them, right? And so she's trying to parse that out, like how do I act around this person,
right? Yeah,
who is what I expect a priest to be.
Yeah, right? Yeah, and it might even be like she feels the word father when she looks at him versus like, Karras, she might be doing it like out of respect, out of like, oh, you're a priest. So I begin with Father Karras, right? And, just like Mr. But then she looks at him as like, oh, this guy's a father.
Right.
But yeah, so we cut and now we're on the floor with Chris, sort of behind or over the shoulder. She's blurry and we see Merrin clearly. Grandpa in his favorite chair by the fire and he's telling us a story and he's giving us some life advice. He takes a breath before he begins to speak and then he starts out very, very serious. Well, the doctors say I shouldn't, right? He's very, very serious, right? Keeps his eyes averted, reaches over to the cup and saucer. There's like a pause, like of a seasoned storyteller. And then he says, but thank God, my will is weak. And he looks up and you see there's this like smile in his eyes. His mouth is trying not to smile. Like we didn't even know that it was a joke, but then he just delivered the punchline, right? And that's the difference, I think, between dad jokes and grandpa jokes. Dad jokes are all punchline, right? They make a big show of it. Grandpa jokes go to serious places, and you think it's like going to be this serious life lesson or like a story about the war, and then they just look up with this little half smile, and you're like, oh, I get it now. Life is crazy, right? Life is funny and scary and horrible, but like also, like beautiful. And grandpas get it because they lived it.
I like the idea of him being grandpa here. So we've seen this couch he's on before when Father Dyer and Mary Jo were on it. And they just look smaller. I went back and looked at that scene again, and they just look smaller, and it looks like there's even more room in that couch for them.
Right.
And now,
even though, like, and I'm remembering it in my mind, I'm not seeing the shot in front of me. But isn't Father Dyer like he's like all spread out in the chair too?
And
right?
he has plenty of room left.
so he's trying to make himself as big as possible, and he's still not as big as Merrin, who's kind of like tucked into himself as he's sitting.
Exactly. So Merrin has left room on the couch. It's a love seat, and if I'm alone in the love seat, I do spread out. Like treated like a single chair, right? But but he's actually to the far end of it, as if like he wants to not take up space. But his presence is so big, right, that the couch seems smaller. He seems larger, and it feels like he takes up that space, even though he's not trying to. He's trying to do the opposite.
Yeah, that's really like, and again, that just adds to the presence that Merrin has, like without even intending to, right? Like he makes all of us feel small, he makes all of us feel childlike, right? But really, he's like sitting in that chair trying to take up as little space as possible,
right? Well, and it's also getting back to the idea of the grandpa joke. It is so funny. You don't expect priest to be funny, I suppose, and so the more he looks like a priest, the more she doesn't expect him to be funny, or that.
And this is the most priestly looking priest,
right? So she's taking it entirely at face value that what he's saying is real, right? Yeah. And we've had Father David Mowry on the show, who is just hysterical and a great podcaster, and he's a podcaster and he's a priest and he's a college professor, and he's younger than us. So, but even so, it's like at first when you talk to him, you're like, oh, are these jokes? Like when you listen to his work, right? He's funny, you're still like, oh God, am I allowed to be laughing at this or what have you?
Right.
Because he's got the uniform on of the priesthood and everything, so this must be serious stuff.
And Father David, when we say like, oh, are these jokes? We mean you have such a magnetism to you. You have such a you command such a presence.
He's hysterical.
We're like, are we allowed to laugh?
Yeah, are we allowed? Exactly. Are we allowed to laugh? Maybe you have to have gone through seminary to be able to laugh at him.
Right. These are priest jokes. You got to be a priest to laugh at these. No, he's great. But yeah, so now we cut back, and now we're on Chris, and she is looking at Father Merrin, and I read a couple things on her face here. It is the deadpan, not eye rolling because she's not rolling her eyes,
right.
but it's that look that you give a dad or a grandpa after one of these jokes. It's like, I'm not going to laugh at that. But also, and this is important, Chris is an old enough child in this situation to realize that the joke was for her benefit. And so we also see in her face gratitude. Like, I see what you did there, is what that look says.
Right.
Because Chris wants to be useful, even in this late stage in the game, even after she's been the one to do the heavy lifting and to bring everyone together, she still wants to be useful in some way. And Merrin picks up on that because he's Merrin, and he gives her this opportunity, just like before in the book, like where you could tell he didn't really want coffee, but like she saw that she needed him to want coffee. And now it's the brandy. So we hold on this look of gratitude for a bit, and then she puts down the wood and the matches, and she gets up and takes his coffee. As soon as she leaves the frame, we cut, and now we are with Dimmy. There he is. If we were wondering where he was in this minute, now we have our answer. He's running up and down the steps like Rocky. No.
Well, no, down, I suppose. All downs here. Descending.
Yeah, it's all down.
Descending.
He's descending. Oh, yeah. Actually, I really like this shot here. We got Karras running down the steps of Georgetown University. He's backlit with this fog, and he's got his own street light and his own long black coat. He is becoming another exorcist. No longer a lonely black cloud in search of the rain, as Blatty puts it. His hurried steps have purpose. He has found his purpose, and he is heading to it. As he hurries down the steps, we hear Father Merrin's voice carry over from the next scene. And it says, especially important is the warning to avoid conversations with the demon. And as much as I joked in the last minute that this is exactly what Dimmy has been doing this whole time, this line, Keenan, always gets me. I can remember it hitting me the first time I watched this all the way through as a kid. I feel like it's almost one of those unsung lines in the movie. Like, we don't quote it as much as like the power of Christ compels you or do you know what you did, right? But it is a really good line, and it's delivered in a really cool way because we have, firstly, Father Merrin saying it, right? Wise man of authority, right? Our adopted father. But then also, he's not there. It's a disembodied voice, like the voice of Dimmy's memory or the voice of God. And it's played as Dimmy is running. So we get the feeling that this is like what is on his mind, right?
Yeah. In the script that we have, they are two separate scenes. So it is Karras running down the stairs, and then he enters, and then Merrin tells him this in person, which is obviously still what's logically happening in the movie as it is, right? But through editing, we have transposed them together so that, it's what he seems to be thinking as he's running down these stairs and hurrying, right? Like he has all this physical stuff to do, and he has all this mental stuff to do and think about these new rules.
Yeah, I really, really like it. And then also like just the wording of it, right? Especially important is the warning to avoid conversations with the demon. One, just the word choice of warning is gonna trigger our lizard brain, right? But it also implies that this is an established thing. Like that might actually be a warning in the Roman ritual, and it gives us this like weight, and it makes this situation more real. Like these are the established rules, right? So there are rules to this thing. Karras is over here saying, right, it just doesn't happen anymore, Miss McNeil, and there are no experts. But Merrin is telling us no. There is an established way to do this, right? There are steps, there are guidelines, and there are warnings, and this is one of them.
So what do you think about getting this so late as opposed to, I don't know, in Gremlins, we hear it right at the beginning. Like these are the warnings, and then we see the, what's his name's family, right? Not heeding those warnings, right? So we don't have that.
No, not the McAllisters.
Kevin McAllister's family from Gremlins.
Yeah. Oh, shit.
I always think that kid is Ralph Macchio, but it's not.
No, it's not.
It's Zach Galligan as the Billy Peltzer.
Peltzers, the Peltzers.
The Peltzer family.
Right? with the inventor dad who makes no money. go hang out with Howard.
Well, they have that microwave that could probably cost them $3,000 in 1984.
Sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But anyways, what do you think about that?
Yeah.
That we're only hearing that here at the end rather than, at the beginning, and then seeing Damien either by choice or by accident, like not following those rules as they do in the Peltzer family.
Well, I think the answer to your question, or part of the answer, is that the movie that you mentioned was a comedy.
So we see them doing it, uh-oh.
Yeah, right? So it's like, I feel like, I would have it no other way. Like I'm trying to think if this little stipulation were introduced sooner in The Exorcist. Well, firstly, you wouldn't be able to, because like it takes them so long to come to terms with the fact that it is a possession, right? So they wouldn't be saying, like, Dr. Klein wouldn't be being like, important is the warning to not, talk to the demon, right?
Well, okay, but what if even when we get Damien on the scene, at the beginning of Act 2, right?
Okay, so he's like, maybe he's done a little bit of research, because we know he does research, right? And he's going to read.
He has certainly heard this rule before.
Yes, if he has done his research, then this has crossed his eyeballs already.
Well, he's a learned person who, in addition to being a priest, studies the occult, and so he has definitely heard this before. Right. So obviously he's not heeding that in the beginning, but what if the audience were told that, like, hey, this is something you are supposed to avoid, and then we see Damien getting like seduced by the demon into having this conversation, or he's getting, these problems with his mother are forcing him into breaking these rules.
Right. I think it would be a different story. I think as soon as you introduce the don't touch the red button or, don't eat the apple, right? Then everyone's going to be looking at that apple. Everyone's going to be like, it's like, when is Demi going to talk to the demon? When is when is the demon going to trick him into conversing with him?
Right.
And that's going to be like a little game that we might get distracted by, and maybe Friedkin and or Blatty didn't want us to do that. Maybe rather they both wanted us to like realize in horror that like, the call is coming from inside the house. It's like, wait a minute, we already fucked up.
Exactly, and there's no taking it back.
We haven't even started, and we're screwed.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So as you're saying that, I guess another part of the fun of a horror movie, and again, I don't know if this is a fun horror movie, right? Like I'm not sure it's a fun horror movie. I don't know if Rosemary's Baby is a fun horror movie, but
this is as much a fun horror movie as The Seventh Seal is.
Right.
A fun musical comedy.
Like, I think Alien is a fun movie. Alien is a fun horror movie, and The Thing and An American Werewolf in Paris, and like those are terrifying movies, but you're fun being terrified. Whereas I don't think
the Freddy Krueger ones, and Michael Myers,
absolutely, and Texas Chainsaw. But like, this and Rosemary's Baby, I don't know if they're fun. I think that they are. But anyways, a lot of
this is a stare into the abyss movie,
right? A lot of the fun of a horror movie is in Schadenfreude. Right. Like seeing other people making mistakes, and we could be like, oh, I would never do that. Right. I wouldn't go down that hallway at night, or I wouldn't do that. Or, in Aliens, like, hey, can you go get that cat in there? And you're like, well, Brett, I would not go and get that cat.
Exactly,
so you kind of get what you deserve, and it's kind of funny, and it's kind of fun. And obviously it's horrifying.
And we feel smarter. We feel safer.
We feel safer. And like we're still terrified of it. And it's awful, but we're like, oh, geez, that's a lesson we're learned. We would never do that. Right. And so, here, I don't know if we have that Schadenfreude at all, and that seems to not be the design of the piece. And like you said at the beginning of this minute, we've been hard on Demi, about making these mistakes. Like, we've been hard. Some of our listeners have written to us and say we've had this in various degrees, that we've been too hard on the doctors at the beginning, right? Some of our listeners have written in and like, hey, just like I, as an opinion, other people have been actually angry with us, right? That like, oh, you're being like, what would you want to do in this situation, etc. So my advice to the doctors is that if they didn't want their opinions to be judged, they shouldn't have been characters in a movie.
That's right.
For us to sit back and go like, oh, you're so stupid. Oh, Demi and oh, Dr. Tanny and oh, Dr. Klein. Like, we get to observe your opinions and get some of that, we know better than them in retrospect. Right.
That's an intrinsic thing with characters in the movie is we compare ourselves to them. Right. We're gonna try to, find any points where we feel superior. We feel it's like, well, I wouldn't have made that decision.
I wouldn't have done that. I would have been nicer to my mom, I tell you that.
Yeah, didn't he? Right.
Right. So yeah, it's their own fault for being characters so that we could observe and compare themselves. Like it's our own fault for being podcasters that people can now compare their opinions to our opinions. So,
exactly.
So yeah, we welcome the feedback. Like Dr. Tanny and Dr. Klein should welcome our feedback. The idiots.
And folks, again, these this is not saying anything about real actual doctors.
Right.
This is Dr. Klein, Dr. Tanny, and Dr. Behringer
and Foundation,
right? Like we can't deny that Blatty has written them and Friedkin has filmed them, with a little bit of tongue in their cheeks.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah, like Keenan, you're talking about like Schadenfreude, right? Being present in these horror movies, and we kind of we almost take pleasure from like these killings and these interesting intricate ways that the bad guy like gets these these horny teenagers or whatever. Right?
Or I think a little bit those doctors, right? Like when Dr. Klein gets slapped, it's shocking, it's terrifying, and like I was saying, like I feel bad for Dr. Klein in that moment, but I also seen it in audience, it's like it's fun a little bit, right? Too,
right.
To see this guy who like walks in, like I'm the hero of this movie all of a sudden, and then he gets smacked down and break his nose, and right. And so I don't know if we get the Schadenfreude part on Damien at all. I don't think we ever experienced that. But maybe if we had, it's, hey, Damien, don't go talking to that demon. And then he goes up and talks to that demon. We might actually have some of that Schadenfreude and be like, yeah, you've been warned.
Right. Because we're waiting for that to happen.
Right.
Once it's announced. Right.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're only now realizing it after it's too late. And that's scary. That's like, oh no, like have we already lost?
Right.
I was about to say, like before you mentioned that, I was like, yeah, there doesn't seem to be any Schadenfreude in this movie because it's like we care about Reagan, we care about Karras, we care about Chris, right? Then you mentioned the doctors, and I was like, oh yeah, and that slap, and I'm like, yeah.
You could see how that would happen to people, right?
It's like because it's the frustration. Like even if they are 100% thinking that they are doing good,
right?
For Reagan. We, the audience, know more than the characters know, and we are frustrated at that point. And just that slap is just that kind of like lizard brain, like, like somebody had to do it.
Again, like thinking about where we could have made other paths, right, as we're trying to examine what makes this movie so good. So there's a low body count for this movie. So the only other body is Burke. And so imagine instead, in a different horror movie, perhaps a more conventional horror movie, we'd be with Sharon as she says, "Hey Burke, I got to run to the pharmacy, and I can't do both these. Can you stay with Reagan?" And we would be in the audience, like, no. Right? And like we would, even though we care about Burke, especially because of his relationship with Chris, that's what we really care about. We'd still be like, here it is, right? And we sort of like rub our hands together, like, ooh,
exactly,
right.
Yeah. That's when we were like about to get up to go to the bathroom, and they were like, "Oh, no, we're sitting down."
Right. The fun of that horror, of that terror, right? But instead, what we have is Chris coming in and being like, "What the hell is?" And then we learn with her. We're like, "Oh shit!" Like that's like so we don't see any of the fun part of the horror movie. Right. There, we just see the terrible part of the horror movie.
Right.
Yeah.
It's way closer to like a real life tragedy that surprises you.
Right. Yeah.
You're like, this was like Chris comes in and she's mad about like the doctors, and she's like, everything's chaotic. She's trying to get everything like, get life settled back down, and then her best friend is dead.
Right. That's not fun.
Yeah.
No, but I'm just saying again, like it would be fun if we had made some little changes and been like, Burke is going to stay, and then we'd follow Burke going, I'm going to talk to that little bird up there and tell her whatever. We're like, oh gosh, Burke, you kind of are asking for it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. But instead, no, it's like it's too late. We didn't watch him get killed.
Right.
We didn't watch him walk into the trap. We didn't know there was a trap.
Yeah. We didn't watch Sharon make the mistake and us go, Sharon, you done messed up now.
Right. So we weren't like smarter than Sharon at that moment, right? It already happened. It happened off screen.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, so back to this, right? So that little warning that we're getting so late in the film, right? To avoid conversations with the demon, right? And I was talking about earlier how that makes this more real to us. Like, oh, there's a routine, there's established rules for this thing, but also like as much as it makes it more real for us, it also harkens back to these old fairy tales, or even like older, like older than fairy tales, like these old folk legends and these protections, like everybody used to know what to do if you meet a pixie in the woods, right? Or like what not to say when making a trade with a leprechaun, or like how to keep an evil spirit from following you home. Like all these little bits of wisdom from stories about the invisible world that we have forgotten, right? But Father Merrin is here to remind us that the stories, both the good and the bad are true.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to hear more of his wisdom in the next minute. But for now, that is all of my notes. Keenan, is there anything else?
No, that's great. I think we got it.
Yeah. All right, folks, this has been another excellent Exorcist Minute. I've been Lester Ryan Clark. You can reach me on all the socials as Lester Ryan Clark.
And I've been Keenan Diaz, and you can find me on Instagram and Letterboxd at Howdy Keenan.
Yeah, we got our listener group, Compelling Conversations. Go check that out and request to join, and we'll let you in here with us. Thank you so much to everyone who has shared the show by word of mouth or on social media. And a big thank you to everyone who has given us a 5-star ratings on iTunes or Spotify, wherever you listen to our show. We really appreciate that. It's going to help our little podcast grow and find more cool people like you. All right, Keenan, are you thinking what I'm thinking?
I think I am, Lester.
Folks, until next time,
the power of Chuck Norris compels you.
Like, where does your name come from, Father? It's like, oh, it's from a bridge. It's the Chuck Norris Bridge.
Right. Chuck as in to throw off the bridge.
Yes. Yeah.
Little
or
girl.
out a window, if you know what I'm saying.
No, but Chuck Norris doesn't get thrown out a window. Chuck Norris throws the window out of the room.
Yes, exactly. Do you know what she did? No, Chuck Norris did it. That doesn't even make any sense.
It doesn't have to when it's Chuck Norris.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Death had a near Chuck Norris experience.
There we go. That's our 7th seal, right?
Right, exactly.
Instead of Max von Sydow, it's Chuck Norris. And he wins the chess game and he says, "Chuck mate."